you were speaking about academy talent. One, he was an academy talent, but now he's, fully fledged first teamer. We hope he signs a contract, and that is obviously Mason Mount. He's out in Qatar with the England team. Actually has been out the team the last couple of games, so we'll see if he features at all against France. But I think he's probably had his most difficult start to life at Chelsea. This season I think has been probably his worst run of form, but he still had some decent performances. And I really want to talk to you about sort of the future of him at Chelsea and his positioning, because he's done such amazing work at Chelsea for a young player. I think already he's broken records. He's performed in massive games for Chelsea. He's had some lows as well, which any young player has, but I do think there is a valid concern about his development now and being used as kind of a jack of all trades for coaches, kind of a Cesar Azpilicueta further up the pitch in a sense, which is kind of a worry for me. What do you think about his development? And I guess maybe that links to some of the negativity or criticism he receives on a regular basis.
With Mason Mount, I think he's a bit of a victim in terms of, I feel like, the way the coaches try to use him. I think there's clearly a reason all these coaches use him, because it's not fluke. It's definitely not fluke that, people can talk as much as they want about Potter trying to select him now, but your fan favourite Tuchel was selecting him as well. And then, Southgate selecting him, that came with a lot of like backlash and all of that because of the players you have in the team. And I don't really mind that. If you prefer a Foden to a Mount, I'm not going to argue with you. Like, Foden's a great player. Do you understand? I've got no problems with that. I think the issue is the way Mount is as a player, especially off the ball. I think it's hurt him a lot in terms of him moving forward as a player. A lot of people only talk about what he does off the ball now in terms of what he brings to a team. And I've never said Mount is exceptional at anything, but I actually think he's good at most things. So I think he's got decent feet when he gets the ball. He's a good passer of the ball in terms of just like technique wise. Like he can switch the ball like clean right on your feet. Like, do you know what I mean? Like he technically he's a well-rounded footballer. Good energy, good intensity, receives instructions well. With Mason Mount, I think what he's going to struggle with now is maybe managers coming away from him being the main guy. Because I think it's unfair that he's kind of been built into this guy that, and it's been the managers that have also done this. It's like, without Mason Mount, we're not going to do this. And it brings this kind of pressure to his game as well that I don't think is needed at this point in time. Like, he shouldn't be carrying a Chelsea team, in my opinion. Like, he shouldn't have had to carry a Chelsea team in the way he did in the first season with Lampard. Do you understand? And that doesn't mean that every single performance he had was outstanding. But when people needed to stand up and be counted, Mount has done it more than most of the guys that have played. Now, people will argue and say, oh, but, he had that chance because he played week in, week out. And I think that, and there's an element of that which is like true. I think maybe if you play, I don't know, I don't think so personally, but some people might think that if you play Pulisic week in, week out, as much as you play Mount, you get the same results. Personally, I don't think so. But that's the issue people are having, I think, with Mount as well, is that they feel like if certain other players got the game time that he did, they would do what he does. But I've seen enough from players like Ziyech, from players like Pulisic, to suggest otherwise. Do you understand? And that's not, and again, that's not Mount's fault. Like, these guys, when they get the opportunity to come in, they're putting on a real, like, some bad performances. Like, and there's people saying, oh, but it's, what you meant to do in a cameo. There's a lot of players that only get cameos and they do much better than what we've seen. Like that, you can't always use that excuse. I can take it. I can hear that excuse to a certain extent. Like, oh, like you can't expect a player to kind of find their form if they're only coming on for every 15, 20 minutes. But that's not really been the case with Pulisic. Hasn't really been the case with Ziyech. Hasn't really been the case with, I don't know, even Hudson-Odoi sometimes when he's been here. So, like, I think where Mount is getting a lot of the game time, His performances are up and down, and he's been kind of made into this kind of player where people feel like managers think he's like this special, super special talent that can, just, I don't know, win you the game or whatever. I think that is what's hurting him the most. That's what's bringing the criticism. Because I don't think Mason Mount thinks he's that. Do you understand? I think Mason Mount just wants to get on with his game, develop his game. I don't think he wants to be chosen every week, game, week in, week out, just to press and for energy. He's got more to his game than that. But at the end of the day, this is what the managers are asking from him. This is what Southgate's asking from him. You can see Southgate asks him to come on, press, give him energy. Do you understand? And I think if you kind of let him play his all-round game in midfield, I think you will see a much better version of Mason Mount. If it's been as bad as it has, like for as long as it has this season, because that's not really Mason Mount. He's never been like this poor for this long since being at Chelsea, like since being in Chelsea's first team. Do you understand? So I think there's a combination of reasons as to why Mason Mount's getting a lot of criticism at the moment. I think it's unfair. I'd want him to sign a contract. I think 300 grand, I don't know what the numbers are, but 300 grand is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. I think, there's some serious players out there that ain't even on that wage. So he'll do well to get that contract. But if he gets it, I don't really think I'm going to have too much to say about it, to be honest.
I think that the thing of him being required to have such a big role at Chelsea, I think is so relevant in terms of, you look at the players that have come in and Chelsea have invested in to be kind of bigger players and have failed. You look at, I know we're going to talk about I'm going to reference players in different positions, and I know people will go, well, he doesn't play in the same position. But just in terms of particularly attacking ones that we expected to come in and take the burden of maybe creativity or goal scoring, that haven't. Timo Werner, massive failure. Hakim Ziyech hasn't turned out to be a player we want him to be. Christian Pulisic, has kind of stalled at Chelsea at this point. Lukaku didn't become that player. Kai Havertz, I still don't know what Kai Havertz is going to be at Chelsea. There have been so many of those stories over recent years whilst Mount has been developing. And, I think he's kind of become that player because it's been very difficult over recent years to find a consistent player, one who plays in the final third, one that you can go, okay, 9 times out of 10, who are you putting your money on to do something good? And Mason is still top of that list for me. I mean, I know people, you reference it, right? Like people in my comments, on Twitter will say, if Pulisic gets more chances, usually Pulisic is the one I haven't really said anyone's saying anything about Ziyech. I think most people have forgotten about Ziyech at this point, but it's mostly Pulisic I hear say and they show me the stats of his goals and assists in games, and fair enough. I've always been, I'm not a massive fan of Pulisic, but I've always seen what he could offer at Chelsea. But, Mount has been asked to do that. And I think he's been one of those guys in tougher moments to really stand up. And, even this season, we've seen that little, boost we had when Potter arrived and we saw Mount have those performances against Wolves. I thought was probably his best performance of the season. AC Milan away, he was really good on the ball. There is a player there. I mean, do you think, we referenced formations earlier about a 4-3-3. I mean, I think Nate on the left or right of a 4-3-3, for me, and I think he said it himself, is his best role. It is the role he wants to play. And I completely understand that, because I think it's just that blend of him on the ball a bit more, where he's able to dictate things. When he's playing as kind of an inside forward, he does, I think, very naturally become more of an off-the-ball player just for his pressing.
Yeah, no, I agree. And this is one thing I think I saw earlier in the season with Potter, in maybe, I think it might have been one of the Milan games, where he wasn't focused on getting the goals and assists. He was dropping deep, he was picking up the ball, he was switching play. And they're little things. They're not anything like extravagant. But some of the best footballers, they just do some of the simple things just really well and consistently. So like if Mason Mount is getting the ball and he's constantly switching play and he's shuffling the team from side to side, and the opponent is struggling to kind of shuffle from side to side because he's doing it so much, he's picking up the ball, he's keeping it moving. Like Mason Mount can do that. He's capable of doing that. I've seen him do it in a Chelsea shirt. And I think not chasing goals and assists right now this in this precise moment right now, I think is needed. I think they need to take that away from him and just say to him, listen, that is not your job. That isn't your job. Your first job, be a midfielder. Just be a midfielder. Pick up the ball, pop it about a bit, switch play when you can. And if you can support attacks, then yeah, of course, by all means, be that guy to get in the box. Because we haven't got many midfielders that can do that apart from probably Gallagher as well. Who, again, I don't think Gallagher is the type to... The only reason why Gallagher wouldn't play is because Gallagher's not the type. He's not as technically secure as somebody like a Mount is, where he'll drop in and kind of pop it about and switch play a lot more and stuff like that. And Mount has got the odd pass in his locker. It's not as consistent as some of the like better players in a number 10 role, or with a bit more vision and maybe a bit more like a better football brain maybe. Like there are better players than him that can do that stuff. But for me, Mount, like I said, it's not about being exceptional at one thing. Mount can do a lot of things with the football, but I think people just expect too much. They want like everything from Mount. And that's the mistake that fans also make in terms of when they're analysing him or when they're looking at him. You're expecting him to be this guy that can do all these things at an exceptional level. But I think you just need to kind of take away some of that like responsibility of going and getting these goals and assists and being like your top player with the top assists and that. Just let him focus on being a midfielder. And I think that's where you see the best of Mason Mount, in my opinion. Whether Potter lets him do that, it remains to be seen, because I don't think the structure's right for him at the moment either, to be honest. And that's another thing with the team. You know, the structure's not something that really helps Mason Mount either in terms of when he plays. Like you said, we can't score, so we got to play him up top sometimes, or we ain't got enough energy and legs in the midfield, so we have to play him a little bit deeper. It's like he's suffering along with the team as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard suggestions that naturally the contract situation is maybe playing on his head as well, as you'd expect, and it's the same with a lot of players, right? I think, and the upheaval, I think just there is, when we were speaking about sort of Chelsea and Abramovich and the chaos and how we need to get away from that, there is a there's collateral damage from that. And I think it absolutely has impacted players, even players like Mount, who are regarded some of the more consistent or like to have the right mentality at Chelsea. I think that it's clearly going to impact players when they're being asked every couple of years, okay, now you're a number 8 in a 4-3-3, or now you're going to play as an inside forward. Now, we need you to do this, we need you to do that. And it's, for a young player still developing, it's probably not the best thing for him and where he wants to see his career go. I think that he could be a very good player or just an impactful player in his current position. But I think there may be a ceiling to what he could do. I think if we wanted a more rounded long-term player at Chelsea who maybe turns out to be a lot more creative in his game and gets better, I do agree that maybe a number 8 is where his future lies. Before we wrap up, Jay, just your kind of hopes for the rest of the season. I know we've been speaking a lot about what Chelsea have to get used to, and Chelsea fans have to get used to suffering a bit. But what are sort of your hopes and positive sort of feelings for the second half of the season?
While we're still close to top 4, I think my hopes would be that if we can get off to a good start, maybe get like 2 solid wins, I think with like good performances as well versus Forest and Bournemouth. I think not being in the cup competitions might help us. I know we'll still be in the Champions League. I think we've got Dortmund, haven't we? So that's going to be very interesting. They haven't been that great this season either, to be fair. So I think I'd expect us to beat them and carry on into the Champions League. I actually expect a decent Champions League run. I think we've still got it in us to kind of go on a run in the Champions League. But in the league, I wouldn't be surprised if it's top 6. But while we're still there and abouts for top 4, I still think we can do top 4. It's just about, I suppose it's just about this period, isn't it? Like what Potter's maybe discovered in terms of what he's chosen to go with. Has he had enough time to think about, like you said, maybe 1 or 2 kind of formations where he goes back and forth to one, like both of them. But, you know, everything's a little bit more consistent. So the instructions that he's giving the players is a bit more consistent. Does he know exactly who he's going to kind of go with for most positions now when they come back? Because he would have learned a lot even watching in the World Cup, like watching some of the players, you know, like that's what I'm saying. Like some of it can play into his hands in terms of watching Ziyech for Morocco, watching Pulisic for USA. Maybe that's something that he needed to do because he didn't get to do it as much in pre-season because he was focusing on his Brighton squad. Do you know what I mean? So, and then we've got the January window as well, and we can't forget that. I mean, there's been a lot of exciting talk about the January window, in my opinion. If we get that right, that can change a lot, in my opinion, because I think not having somebody like a Kante, maybe, you know, all of a sudden we have a backup for Reece James, we have a backup for Kante, and then it's like, okay, like we might be back, like we might have a squad again to kind of at least push for top 4. So yeah, all in all, top 6, preferably obviously top 4, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a thing where, due to everything that's just gone on at the beginning of the season and Paul like not having the time that he probably wanted at the beginning of the season, maybe it might be a reason as to why we just about finished outside top 4.
Yeah, I think the one thing Potter needs, and I think the one thing the club needs, is a boost of positivity. You know, a feeling of unity. I think for Potter, unfortunately, he needs a big win against a big rival. I think that's what he needs. I think that is what it will take to kind of get people, you know, for Lampard was going to be Lampard, but I, you know, distinctly remember the win at Spurs. Felt like a massive moment in his season. For Tuchel, he got it quite early away at Spurs, funny enough as well. Maybe we just need to play Spurs and we'll have it. But, you know, I know we played Man City quite early on. And listen, at the moment, no one is going to give Chelsea much of a chance in that game. But, you know, you could imagine the scenes. You know, it's nice to think of if we beat Man City at home or we beat them away in the FA Cup. I think it will take something like that, I think, also to put Tuchel in the past, finally. You know, and really make people feel like, no, Graham Potter is the Chelsea coach now. This is his era. You know, now we can look forward a bit. And it's not just, you know, I'm not just going to put that on the fans and say, oh, you know, blame the mood around it. You know, the players and Potter himself need to produce that. They need to produce those performances that make us all inspired. You know, if we play like we did against Newcastle and Arsenal, where there's no optimism and you don't see the team gelling, you don't see them trying to go for the game, naturally fans are going to be like, what's the point in this? Like, it feels even more depressing.
Yeah, no, and that's what I would want to say as well, is like, for me, I'm quite optimistic sometimes, like a lot of the time. I'm optimistic about how things are going to go when we get rid of a manager or whatever, and I just try to see the better side of things, because I don't really like doing this whole thing where it's like, he's not going to be good and this and that, like from the get-go. Like, I'm not really like that. I try to see the positives, and then I just try to kind of see where the team's going, and I just focus on what's in front of us, because like at the end of the day, Tuchel's not coming back, you know, and whatever you may think about the owners, they clearly have their reasons as to why they've gone with Potter, and we're seeing them as well very active in terms of forming the structure of the club as well. So it's not just Tuchel's position that changed. Do you understand? It's a lot of people's positions changed. And that's what I think people need to remember. It's not just Tuchel. A lot of people left with Tuchel. You know what I mean? Cech, who is more of a Chelsea boy than Tuchel will ever be, is one of the people that went as well. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, and that's not to say that Tuchel is not special to Chelsea fans. I think he will forever be. I think his time here was amazing. I think I was even still sad to even see him go at the time he did. But I think I just think in general now what we need to do is we do need to kind of let Potter have this time to just show what he's actually been brought in for. Because a lot of what we're doing is potential. I don't know if you've seen like some of my tweets, but a lot of my tweets recently it's been a lot to do with like the youth and potential, because a lot of what we're doing right now, it just seems like it's surrounded by potential. Potter, in terms of coming to a big club, is, again, it's a platform for him to become potentially one of the better managers in the league at a big club. We know that he's a good manager at Brighton. We've seen it over the years. But the questions are obviously being asked, is he good enough to manage a big team? He was brought in based off potential. They don't know what Potter's going to be like in the next couple of years, but what they think he's going to be is a great manager. And that's the same with the academy and the players that we have there. And it's the same with the young talent that we're scouting at the moment and bringing into the club. It's all potential. And even the team in recruitment, that's also based off these new guys that have been in the not new guys. They've been in obviously their roles for a while, but I think some of them are kind of like names coming up. You know what I mean? In terms of in the field, in terms of being great at recruitment and great at structuring a side and stuff like that. So all of this is new. It's not just what's going on the pitch. So for like you said, for you to kind of just be getting that Potter after 8 weeks, you have to understand that there's a whole movement that might even take maybe 12 months. Do you know what I mean? To actually form itself properly and actually start working. So yeah, man, just got to be positive, patient, I guess, and then hope for the best. Because otherwise, it's just more chaos in it. So I'm not really for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to, fall into just nihilism. Nihilism FC. You want to have some positivity and hope around football, and especially Chelsea. So, as hopefully that potential turns into something better, and I really do think that I think we've got good players. I do. I don't think the squad is completely trash. Like I reject that idea, and I just don't think it's very fun to think that all the players are just abysmal. Because we have seen some, all right, they've been rare, but some decent performances this season. So hopefully, as you said, we'll see it in the second half of the season. Thank you so much, Jay, for coming on the podcast today. As I do with all my guests, just a chance for you to shout out where people can find your work or your Chelsea thoughts online.
Yeah, my Twitter handle is I don't mind, spelled EYE, don't mind. So just type that in and you'll find me on Twitter. Just talking a lot about Chelsea, really. That's all I really use football for, mainly football. But yeah.
Yeah, defo. Go and follow Jay. Really good account. And as I said, as you've seen in this conversation, some really good thoughts and interesting thoughts about Chelsea. If you are listening on the podcast feed, please do give us a rate and review. It really does help out. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and a notification bell so you don't miss any of the uploads. Follow me on Twitter @SonOfChelsea, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.